December 1944. A Third Army Signal Command post near Luxembourg City. Inside the frozen stone walls, the rhythmic clicking of telegraph keys and the hum of vacuum tubes fill the air as officers map the latest German troop movements. Then comes the disruption. A white communications officer stands over a map table, laughing openly during a morning intelligence briefing. He points at a native soldier and calls his sacred ancestral language savage gibberish, his voice carrying across the entire signal section as other officers join in the ridicule. The native soldier remains silent, staring straight ahead as he absorbs the public insult. But the general in command of the Third Army does not tolerate division when American lives are on the line. George S. Patton will soon deliver a public, unmistakable lesson in respect that this arrogant officer will never forget. German war weapons, Gem Tweeching analysis. German war weapons danoi humtimte fanhoi to Gemini, haida ai huantine Coachella. The European continent was frozen hard by the middle of December 1944. The Allied advance had slowed to a crawl against the German frontier. Supply lines were stretched across hundreds of miles of ruined roads and blown bridges. In the Ardennes sector to the north, 3 German armies were secretly messancing for a massive counteroffensive that would catch the Allies completely by surprise. In the southern sector, the Third Army was preparing its own assault into the Saar region. Chaos was the standard condition of every headquarters. Signal commands were working 24 hours a day to keep up with shifting front lines and intercepted German radio traffic. In this environment of constant pressure, discipline often grew frayed at the edges. Minor infractions were routinely ignored by senior staff officers who were too buried in maps and casualty reports to referee personal disputes. Arrogance among West Point or Citadel graduates was frequently tolerated if those officers kept the communication lines open and the reports flowing on time. Many commanders looked the other way when old prejudices from back home reared their heads in the tents and command posts of Europe. They considered it a friction of war. They considered it secondary to winning the battle. They did not understand that a single insult could destroy the cohesion of an entire intelligence section. They did not see that the very men being sidelined by bigotry were the ones holding the key to survival. The German airwaves were thick with coded traffic that standard American crypt analysts could not break fast enough. The pressure was mounting in the Luxembourg command post. The afternoon briefing inside the stone schoolhouse was crowded and loud. Lieutenant Reginald Pierce stood by the map board, a red grease pencil in his hand. He looked at Captain Arthur Vance, a 31-year-old company commander from Columbus, Ohio, who was waiting for the final signal routing updates. "We need the line to the 80th Division secured before dark," Captain Vance said. "The lines are as secure as my men can make them," Lieutenant Pierce answered, tossing the pencil onto the table. "But we are wasting valuable time routing operational traffic through the code desk." Captain Vance frowned. "Corporal Bear Track is processing the intercepts exactly as ordered by the Corps signal officer." "It is an absurd system," Lieutenant Pierce said, his voice carrying across the room. "We are relying on primitive babble that has no place in modern military operations. The man speaks in a savage gibberish. We cannot verify what he is saying, and it creates a massive security vulnerability." Several younger officers near the radio racks laughed quietly. Corporal Bear Track sat 3 feet away at the monitoring station, his headset resting around his neck. He kept his eyes fixed on his logbook. His hand remained steady as he sharpened a yellow pencil with a pocket knife. He did not look up. "That language is our most secure link," Captain Vance said, his voice dropping an octave. "The Germans cannot crack it. The Germans are an educated, modern army," Lieutenant Pierce countered, crossing his arms over his tailored tunic. "They use advanced machines for their ciphers. We are using a dialect from the Stone Age. It is an insult to the intelligence of this section." Corporal Bear Track suddenly stood up. He walked past Lieutenant Pierce without a word and handed a yellow message slip directly to Captain Vance. The paper contained the decoded text of the German radio transmission intercepted 2 hours prior. Captain Vance read the paper. His face went pale. The text detailed a major German counterattack, aimed directly at the 80th Division's southern flank, scheduled to begin in exactly 6 hours. "Is this verified?" Captain Vance asked. "It is verified," Corporal Bear Track said. "I checked the frequencies twice," Lieutenant Pierce stepped forward and snatched the paper from the captain's hand. He glanced at the text, then looked at the corporal. "This is a broad interpretation of static," Corporal Pierce said. "You are seeing ghosts in the wire because you want to look useful. The warning went out on the wire anyway. 6 hours later, the German assault hit the southern flank, but the American units were dug in, their artillery already zeroed on the advancing tanks. The attack was broken in 90 minutes. The next morning, Lieutenant Pierce handed the official after-action report to Captain Vance. The captain flipped to the intelligence summary. The breakthrough was credited entirely to signal section analysis. Corporal Bear Track was not mentioned. "This report is incomplete," Captain Vance said. "The report is exactly what it needs to be," Lieutenant Pierce answered. "The section analyzed the data. Individual operators do not receive public billing for doing their jobs." Captain Vance closed the folder. "This goes above my desk." The report reached Patton within the hour. The general walked in unannounced. Patton's jeep pulled up to the stone schoolhouse at precisely 9 o'clock. The 4 silver stars on his helmet caught the gray morning light, and the ivory-handled revolvers rested against his hips. He stepped into the signal command post without a sound, his boots clean despite the mud outside. Every man in the room froze. The hum of the radio equipment seemed to drop as 80 officers stood at rigid attention. Patton studied the room. His eyes passed over the maps, the radio racks, and finally rested on the signal desks. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Where is Lieutenant Pierce?" Patton asked. Lieutenant Pierce stepped forward, his posture perfect, his citadel ring catching the light. "Right here, General." Patton looked at him for a long moment. "Did you write the after-action report for the action on December 18th? "I did, General," Pierce said, his chin lifted. "Who intercepted the German transmission regarding the counterattack?" Patton asked, his voice dead calm. "The signal section monitoring team, General," Pierce answered. Patton stepped closer. "I asked for a name, Lieutenant." "Who took the message out of the air?" "It was Corporal Bear Track, sir," Pierce said, his voice dropping slightly. "And who translated that message from the tribal cipher into English to warn our forward units?" Patton asked. "Corporal Bear Track did, sir," Pierce said. Patton did not blink. "Then why is his name missing from your report?" Lieutenant Pierce swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the other officers. "General, the use of unverified languages creates a security vulnerability. The report attributes the success to the collective analysis of the entire signal section, which I oversee. We cannot rely on primitive dialects to dictate modern military movements. It was an administrative decision." Patton took a single step forward. His face was entirely without expression. "You are an educated man, Lieutenant," Patton said. "You speak German, you speak French. You believe that 400 years of family history and a ring from the Citadel make you an expert on the management of war. You look at a man from the Pine Ridge Reservation, and you see someone beneath the dignity of your command. You think his language is a joke." The room remained completely silent. "The German army is an advanced machine," Patton continued. "They have broken our standard ciphers before. They have intercepted our wires. But they did not break the message sent on December 18th. They did not break it because they do not have a dictionary for the Lakota language. The savage gibberish you laughed at yesterday morning is the exact reason the 80th Division had 6 hours to dig their holes. It is the exact reason we did not bury 200 American soldiers in the snow this morning." Patton looked at the lieutenant's polished boots, then back to his eyes. "You have a choice, Lieutenant. You will publicly undo the insult you delivered in this room, or you will face the immediate consequences of your arrogance. Decide now." Lieutenant Pierce stood frozen, his face entirely drained of color. He did not speak. Patton did not wait for the lieutenant to find his voice. He turned to the side and called Corporal Joseph Bear Track to the front of the room. The 24-year-old soldier stepped out from behind his monitoring desk and stood before the general. His Class A uniform was neat, his eyes fixed on the wall ahead. Patton reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. He opened it, revealing the bronze star medal with a V device for valor. With slow, deliberate movements, Patton pinned the medal to the corporal's tunic, right above the pocket that held his grandfather's medicine pouch. Patton stepped back and delivered a sharp, formal salute. Corporal Bear Track returned it. "Now," Patton said, turning his cold gaze back to the lieutenant. Lieutenant Pierce stepped forward. The lieutenant dragged his boots across the stone floor until he stood directly in front of the corporal. "Salute this man," Patton ordered. "Thank him for saving the lives of your fellow soldiers. And apologize to him and to every officer in this room for the ignorance you displayed yesterday. Do it now." Pierce raised his right hand. His fingers trembled against his brow. He looked at Bear Track, whose face remained completely steady. "Like stone." "Corporal Bear Track," Pierce said, his voice cracking in the quiet room. "I apologize for my remarks of yesterday. They were unprofessional and inaccurate. Your work saved American lives. I thank you for your service." The entire signal section watched in silence as the hierarchy of arrogance dissolved in front of them. Corporal Joseph Bear Track returned to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota after the war ended. He spent the rest of his life working the land and raising horses under the big northern sky. He never spoke to his neighbors or his children about the coded messages or the German intercepts. The work he did in the stone schoolhouses of Europe remained classified by the government for decades, a secret kept in locked steel cabinets in Washington. He died quietly in 1984, long before the world found out what the code talkers had done. Lieutenant Reginald Pierce spent the remainder of the European campaign in a wet foxhole on the forward edge of the line. He survived the freezing winter and returned to Charleston in 1946, where he entered the real estate business. He grew old in a large house with white pillars, but his old confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet bitterness that he never quite managed to shake. He died in 1998, never once mentioning the name of the Lakota corporal to the family members who gathered around his bed. General George Patton kept the original signal reports in his personal files until his death in December 1945. He wrote about the incident only once, in a private diary entry meant for no eyes but his own. He noted that the American Army was a massive machine made of many different parts, and that a commander who threw away a tool because he did not like the color of the handle was a fool who did not deserve to win. Some historians have argued that Patton's public humiliation of a commissioned officer violated the traditional boundaries of military discipline and undermined the authority necessary to command troops in battle. They suggest that such a display should have been handled behind closed doors to preserve the chain of command during a critical winter campaign. Others have argued the opposite, maintaining that a swift, public correction was the only way to eradicate systemic prejudice and ensure that critical intelligence operations were not sabotaged by bigotry. What is certain is that the Lakota cipher remained completely unbroken by the enemy throughout the entire duration of the war in Europe. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have done the same, or would you have simply rewritten the report and handled the lieutenant privately? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about when the uniform is the only skin that matters, make sure to subscribe.